English 122, Day 12. Using, citing, and documenting sources. From Writing Arguments, pages 368 to 393. Always be purposeful in selecting sources and incorporating them into your own work. You may need to summarize a source completely, especially if the source represents an opposing or alternative point of view you wish to address, or you may use only part of a source, so let your rhetorical purpose guide your use of your sources. Always use attributive tags to separate your ideas from your sources. These are phrases such as, according to the source says, or the source argues, etc. These phrases signal to the reader that the material immediately following the tag is from the cited source. If you use an author tag, the parenthetical citation at the end of the sentence need only indicate the page numbers from the print text. This is actually the preferred method because the author tag is more precise as to which information in the sentence came from the source than a parenthetical citation at the end would be. Especially when you introduce a source for the first time, use the attributive tag not only for documentation, but also to shape your reader's attitude toward the source. So use attributive tags rhetorically. This will help your readers understand the significance and context of a source and guide your reader's attitude toward the source. See the chart on page 372 in the text for further information. But here's an example. We can see that writer has colored her reader's interpretation of the information. Next, choose the best method for incorporating the source into your work. Decide whether you'll be using the source as support for your own argument or to present a counterargument or alternative point of view. Summary is a condensation of a source's whole argument, which you might use when a source presents an opposing or alternative view or when a source supports one of your own points. Next, decide whether you will paraphrase a portion of the argument or quote directly from the source. Paraphrase translates a short passage from a source into your own words. You want to paraphrase when you want specific information from a brief passage from the source and when you don't want to interrupt the flow of your own voice. When paraphrasing, remember to avoid the author's original grammatical structure and syntax. Use as few quotations as possible. Quote only when doing so strengthens your argument. Quote when a respected authority supports one of your points. Quote when you are summarizing an alternative view and want to prove that you have listened carefully and accurately. And quote when you want to give readers the flavor of a source's voice. Also quote when you want to analyze a source's choice of words, but when quoting, be sure to be meticulous in copying the passage exactly, including the punctuation. You must make sure that you understand the conventions of quoting as well. If the quote is a complete sentence, it starts with a capital letter and is separated from the introductory phrase by a comma, as we see in this example. However, if the quote is taken from a print source, the page number is also indicated in parentheses between the ending quotation mark and the ending punctuation, in this case, a period. Notice that the parenthetical citation and the period are not inside the quotes. If the material quoted is not a complete sentence, it should be worked into the grammar of the writer's own sentence and no comma is necessary to introduce it, as we see in this example. Brackets, on the other hand, indicate where the grammar of the original quoted passage has been changed to fit the grammar of the writer's own sentence. Here, the pronouns have been changed to make it more clear to the reader who is being referred to. Also use ellipses or three-spaced periods to indicate words that have been omitted from the original source. If the omission occurs at the end of a sentence, include a fourth period to mark that end. Here's an example where the omission has come from the end of the sentence. Here's an example where the omission has come in the middle of the sentence. Put them together and you have the whole sentence. Also use double and single quotation marks to indicate a quote within a quote. If you're using double quotation marks for the main quote, the internal quote, as we see here, is marked with single quotes. When the quoted material takes up more than 4 lines in your paper, use block quotations by indenting the quoted material 1 inch. Do not use quotation marks in this case. Also, something important to remember is that when using the block quote method, you use a colon instead of a comma at the end of the previous sentence, and the parenthetical citation actually comes outside the terminal period. Finally, understand the conventions of parenthetical citations and bibliographies. Both MLA and APA require a bibliography at the end of the paper. It's called a works cited in MLA and references in APA. In the bibliography, the sources are always arranged alphabetically. Every source in the bibliography must be mentioned in the body of the paper, and every source mentioned in the body of the paper must be listed in the bibliography. That said, there must be a one-to-one correspondence between the first word in each parenthetical citation and the first word in the bibliography entry used to cite that source at the end. Specifically for this class, you'll need to understand the conventions of MLA style. This is the most common citation style. In MLA, be sure to italicize the titles of all longer works, such as these. Smaller article titles go in quotes. Also be sure to cite both volume and issue numbers in journal entries, such as we see here highlighted in red. The next rule is to add the medium of publication to every works cited entry, be it a web source, a print source, a television source, radio source, a photograph, etc. Here we see the database and the medium, web, highlighted in red. In your MLA citations, don't include the URL for web sources unless you think your reader simply cannot locate the source without it, in which case you include arrow brackets. Also, be sure to execute in-text citations correctly. Place the author's last name and the page number reference in parentheses immediately after the material being cited. If an attributive tag already identifies the author, give only the page number in parentheses. You would need no page numbers in this case for a web source. The citation in the in-text citation precedes the terminal period but follows the final quotation mark in the sentence, and these kinds of in-text citations must be included for all quotes and paraphrase. Whenever possible, remember to find the quotation in its original source and go ahead and cite that source. But in some cases, you'll need to use an indirect source. In this case, cite the source by using the term QTD period in parentheses and then citing the indirect source in the works cited. Also use meticulous attributive tags to credit the original source. If a work has no page numbers but numbered paragraphs, you can use the abbreviation pair or pairs to indicate which paragraph the information came from. But if the paragraphs aren't numbered, you do not need to number them for yourself. Also remember that you should not include sources that you read but did not use in the text in your works cited. If there is more than one entry by the same author in one works cited page, then the second and all subsequent entries begin with 3 hyphens followed by a period and the title of that source. You'll also need to specify the title in your in-text citation. Finally, be sure to distinguish between news stories and editorials by putting the word editorial after the title in the works cited entry. Remember these strategies for in-text citations and you'll be sure to document your sources correctly.